Welcome to the What's Your Weird Story podcast.
Everyone has at least one good story.
And some of us have stories that are just to the left of normal.
We're interested in the ones that push the boundaries of what we can perceive.
Stories that defy explanations.
Stories with an air of mystery.
Stories we might not share
for fear of being thought of differently.
But don't worry, we're all friends here. So, what's your weird story? Hello, Weirdsville. How's everybody doing? It is time once again for the What's Your Weird Story podcast with me, Adam Beebe, and with Mr. Barry Johnston.
What's happening? How's it going?
It's going pretty good, man. How are you?
Good. It's we got fall within like a matter of seconds yesterday. We got just hit with really cold weather and rain, which is fine by me. It's been a long summer, been a hot one, and so yeah, it's been nice. It's kind of dreary out, but yeah, it's 40. I think the high last time I looked it was 47 degrees. So we went from 90s to pretty chilly here in the heartland, but it's nice, man. I enjoy it. So, and I know that I think the heat's kind of kicked up by you a little bit, from what I saw.
Well, I guess it's that dog days of summer. It's like the very end. It's gotten back into the upper 80s this week, but I think it's also partly because of your cold front.
Yeah. This crazy cold front that came down. Yeah, it's weird.
So, who knows? And by the time that this goes out, who knows what the weather will be like.
No kidding.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, man, it's, I'm looking forward to the fall. Yeah. I embrace the fall. I like the fall. It's my second favorite of the seasons. Winter being my favorite. I'm one of those people.
Yeah.
I'm very warm blooded, very warm natured. So I like the cool. I like the cold. I like it because, you can always put on more clothes when you're cold.
That's right.
When it's hot, you can only take off to your, your skin.
It's true. And the older I get, the heat just sucks it out of me, man.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I hear you. So yeah, man. What else is new?
Oh, just staying busy, man. Got lots of stuff going on. Kids are back to school, playing sports, doing all that kind of stuff, and also you and I we've been kind of working on the behind the scenes stuff.
That's true.
So we kind of want to talk about that a little bit. We got we're revamping the way that we are doing this podcast, not with the content or our production or anything like that, but more on the back side of things, how things are getting put out to people.
Yeah, the behind the scenes, it's like, everything, the show's going to be the same. Everything we're going to tell stories. We're going to be doing it all. It'll, just everything's the same. It's just we're going to be doing more hands-on behind the scenes work as far as distributing and getting our stuff out and making sure it gets everywhere. Because we've had some, we've run into some stuff, some difficulties and technical problems that we could fix, but it took, longer than we wanted. Plus, hopefully it saves us a little money because, podcasting, it's free to listen to. But it costs us a little bit of money to bring this to you. So, we're just looking for a more efficient way to really do it. So.
Yeah, we've had a third party handle everything for us so far, and it was great up until a certain point, and then it gets to the point where we need things done, and people don't get back to us in a timely manner, and so we're kind of trying to make the next leap in control, and it'll be good. And we're also still working on Spin Jamorama, which is it's something that you and I have been, trying to figure out how to do it right, do it the proper way, and so we're kind of revamping that also.
Yeah, we are. That's one of the good things about what we're going to do behind the scenes is it's going to give us the opportunity to do Spin Jamorama right it's going to allow us to put it out as its own separate entity podcast. So we'll be doing 2 podcasts at some point.
Yep.
It still won't be a weekly thing. It'll be a little less frequent, but hopefully we'll be able to make more episodes. And we're doing a change of format on that show, where it's going to be just us talking about music. So it might be one week where we're doing a album review and listening to bands that we're not too familiar with, or it could be that we have a discussion of our top 5 Elvis songs, or it could be that we have some buddies on from bands. Just all sorts of fun things, making it more of a mixtape rather than a straightforward just review type.
Yeah,
show.
we'll still do that, but yeah, because we can talk forever about stuff. So it's cool. We're just loosening it up a little bit, and on a regular basis, you and I talk about music and stuff. And so I think the idea is sort of taking off some of the reins and letting that be kind of what it is,
Yeah, and to be more organic, and often like Barry will shoot me a text, and he'll have his a screen cap of his Spotify that he's listened to, and this is my new obsession,
Yeah.
And so I'll do the same. I'll send him a link to a YouTube video for some some band or something. So that you've got that to look forward to, and just more of the same good usual stuff from us in the regular format of What's Your Weird Story, and more of our guests and more of our friends popping back up. Yeah. As they tend to do, are from some of our favorite storytellers. Keep everything going on, and that kind of leads to what we've got today.
That's right.
We've got it's a riot. It's a riot. I predict a riot. We've got,
and Sam is in the middle of it.
Sam is always in the middle of the riot.
Yeah.
So our buddy Sam is back once again, and this time he's going to be sharing some stories of some riots that he has found himself involved in, not necessarily as a participant, but more as an observer.
Yeah.
And and there's it's really cool. It's really interesting, considering a lot of the fact that we are in our country having a lot of riots that are happening now, although it's more protest rather than riots, and Sam also was more involved in more kind of like protest rather than riots. So, and I think we really need to understand that, especially for what's happening in our country at this time. Most of the protest, like I think I saw a thing where it said 93% of all the recent Black Lives Matter type protests have been peaceful, completely peaceful. So all of the, the rioting and all of the looting and all of that stuff has really been blown out of proportion by, all the media, because that's what gets people's eyeballs on to watch, so nobody wants to watch a bunch of people sitting around politely and singing songs. They want to see, people going ape shit. So
right. Yep. That's the media.
So yeah. So hey, that's what we're cashing in on with Sam coming here to
100%.
give us his ape shit riot stories. So
absolutely.
So Sam, buddy, always a pleasure to have you on. What's your weird story?
I've been overseas since 2002, and I run into the occasional events of civil unrest and protestations, and I definitely not the kind of person who avoids them. I'm going to jump in head first. I've been involved in them in Korea and Thailand and Egypt. I've been shot at. I've been tear gassed. I've been subjected to looking at a man's testicles. Just the normal things that happen at protest.
Testicles are usually. I don't. That's the first I've heard of protesting in testicles.
Well, the testicles will come out a little later.
Okay.
I'll start out my.
As often they do.
Well, my first protest came about my first summer in Korea. And it was a very odd year. When I first got over there in January 31st, 02, the Winter Olympics had happened around that time, and Koreans got very anti-American because I don't follow sports in general. I definitely don't follow the Olympics and all their pseudo sports and games. But one of the short track speed skating events had led to this American named Ono, who had called out a Korean who'd broken a rule. And he brought attention to it, so the judges made sure to see it, and the guy got disqualified. And so at that point, they hated Ono, and they were very angry at America, but they kept that on the back burner for a while. But it kept coming up a lot. Just anytime they'd say, "Oh, no," you knew what they were talking about. Had I not been there, I wouldn't have had any idea what this mess was.
Yeah.
They're hosting the World Cup that summer, co-hosting with Japan. And it's a big event. Nobody expects Korea to do very well, including Korea. But they end up making it in the quarterfinals, which is pretty unheard of. Now, again, I'm an American, so I obviously do not follow soccer, but I was there in the middle of this giant event. That was it'd be several years later before I learned that we actually had a soccer, Major League Soccer in America. But they were angrier at us. The Olympic thing didn't go well. And then we kind of killed 2 middle school girls, and that did not go over even worse or well.
Mm-hmm.
Before the World Cup. We've got like 32,000 soldiers over there. Air Force and Army. Used to be a little Navy way down south. I think they're gone. But up in the far north, like if you ever watch MASH, they often mention Uijeongbu, and that's still like a big city for our soldiers. And there's 2 middle school girls were on their way to a birthday party, walking down the street, got run over by a military convoy.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
But the problem, there's issues on both sides, because I mean, these girls lived in the area. Like the U.S. Army did not just show up that day and they'd never seen it before. They lived around this. So that was very weird. On our side, they didn't get hit by the first vehicle in the convoy. These slow-moving, like 10 to 15 miles an hour convoy. You know, there were tanks in the convoy. They got nailed by a bridge-laying tank that was moving at 10 to 15 miles an hour. This particular tank, its comm system was down. But again, it was not the first vehicle in the convoy, and somehow whatever had passed before, they got in the way. It makes no sense. The road, they could have stepped off to the side, and it's even stranger, they both got hit by a slow-moving tank. Yeah. That was not at the head of the convoy. So none of this
cover-up.
Oh, exactly. None of it made any sense. And nobody in Korea cared because the 2 girls were dead, so screw America, screw the military. And they were very, very almost up in arms over it. But they're like, oh, we're co-hosting the World Cup. Let's just shh, quiet. Mm-hmm. This is the biggest thing we've done since the '88 Olympics, which really put us on the world stage. So we don't want to come off as being like some angry hotheads. So we'll shh. So the Olympics went down. The World Cup went down, and it was amazing. It was a great time to be there. My mom came over for part of it. Just every win that they had, the entire city exploded. They had, again, this is in 2002. People were putting up projectors to show games in like every neighborhood on the sides of buildings.
Wow.
Just everywhere you went, just almost every one of the 50 million Koreans were literally just out in the street on blankets and pieces of plastic, just watching the games and cheering. Daehamingu, boom. It was beautiful madness, just a lot of drinking, a lot of celebrating. It was a really, really great summer to be there. So all this went down. I traveled back here with my mom, went to the gathering, got back over there, and like, all right, World Cup's done. We made it in the quarterfinals, and now we can go back. Nobody's looking at us. We can go back to being pissed off in America. So I get back, they're trying to burn down our embassy. And there's just, a couple million angry Koreans in front of our embassy, which is in the like downtown part of Seoul. This is a place where people go to for business, for tourism. The old palace is there. The president's house is there. It's just a giant area to have embassies, and it's hard to escape. And so I went up there to check out what was going on one night, like what was supposed to have been the climax of the action. Sure enough, I get up there, and this is like a 12-lane road, and they've got it blocked off for quite a good ways in there. There's all these people that are, sporadic chanting from the different groups. They end up pulling in a flatbed trailer. People are shaving their heads in protest. Girls are going all Sinead O'Connor on there. Pretty wild. They had one, there was like an official protest song, and the entire thing was in Korean except for 2 English words, and it said "fucking USA," not "fuck USA," but "fucking USA." And I'd not heard it before this night, and I'm just breaking up laughing, and Koreans are coming up to me asking, "Where are you from?" And backtrack a little bit. I had gone in wearing my roommate's. He had a Canuckstanian hockey jersey. I was going to be undercover because, like, oh man, it'd probably be deadly to go in as an American. So I'm going to pretend I'm from Canada.
Yeah.
So I had some weird interactions with some people in my Korean language class that afternoon, where everybody from Canada would ask me, "Oh, you Canuckstanian, eh?" And I'd say, "No, I'm from the U.S." And I wasn't being a dick about it. Like, I had no reason to hate these people. I'm American. Just happen to be wearing a shirt representing one of your hockey teams. And because, you see New York Yankee hats all over the world. So whatever. Like, why are you wearing that? I'm like, okay. Could be because I like hockey. Could be because I like this team. It's not, and it's not. But you don't know that.
Yeah.
Could be because it's clean.
Right.
Yeah, that wasn't the issue back then. Yes, sir, you're not wrong. So I'm walking around in just multiple areas of the city that I visited that day. It was the same conversation with Canuckstanians. And so I renamed their country and their people. So I renamed Canada, Canada, and if you're from there, you're Canuckstanian. That did not help things later on in the future in my dealings with those great people from that great country. But I was like, yeah, I'm going to go undercover. So Koreans had asked me, where are you from? Screw it, man. Why bother with the cover? I'm American. Oh. And again, I'm surrounded by a couple million Koreans protesting, wanting to burn my embassy. Do you know what's going on? Like, yeah. Okay. And they'd bring out, they were all drinking. They had bottles of soju, at the time, 21% Korean alcohol. And they just pop out bottles of that, and they're pouring me shots, and we're at kombe and slugging and going for it and just having a high old time. As long as I said, be honest about where I'm from and say that I knew what was going on, which I did, they were totally cool with my presence. So I get in the middle of this stuff, and I hear the song "Fucking USA," and I'm laughing. This is really not a great place to be laughing. Some folks started asking me why I was laughing. They're like, listen, fucking USA, like that. You only have 2 words of English in the song, and you got it wrong. What do you mean? And I'm trying to explain, like, fuck is a very dynamic word. It can be an exclamation, it can be a noun, it can be a verb, it can be an insult, it can be an adjective, an adverb. It's the one word in the English language. It can be just about everything. It fits every grammatical notch. And y'all used it wrong. Because I was like, if it was just fuck USA, that's just a middle finger to my country, and you're angry at us, and that would make sense. But when you just say fucking something, if I said, this is fucking good soju, it's adding to it. It's not just good, it's fucking good. So when we say fucking USA, we're like, yeah, this fucking protest, yeah. So you've got the wrong tone here, people. They did not appreciate my explanation, pointing out that they'd gotten 2 words grammatically incorrect. But again, no problem. So all this goes on, and there's a whole setup going on through the night. And finally, like, we get to the big push, and they've got all the Korean police out. And the Korean police and the military, almost all of the military and the majority of the riot police are conscripts. You have to do 2 years of service in Korea as a man. Every able-bodied man's got to go in and do their around 2 years-ish in one branch of the military or the riot police or whatever. And so you've got all these like young, and they break up their university experience to do it, which really sucks because they go and they'll do their freshman year and then they got to do this for 2 years.
That does suck.
And exactly. So
I
you've got this.
hate that, man. I just started having fun. College, my first freshman year of college. Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, so they come back and they said that's why the marriage difference between men and women, they're often 2 years. The men are 2 years older because they married women that they graduated with, because they're very much about it's a collectivistic society, so they're very much about our groups,
right,
and stay within them. And so you've got all these like young, early 20-something-ish, 19 years old guys that are in their full-on cop riot gear, face shields, handheld shields, baton, and they've got this big thick line of cops that are trying to protect the U.S. Embassy. And of course, the majority of these kids would much rather be on the other side of the shield. Like, they're out there thinking, fuck USA too, but they can't.
Fucking USA.
Fucking USA.
Fucking USA.
I don't know which one they'd want to do, but whichever one involves setting that building on fire. Yeah. But instead, they're out there being forced protected. And I get up there. Somehow, I end up at the very front of the line. Like, I've got a couple million Koreans behind me pushing me against their shields. The only thing that's separating me from the cop in front of me is his face shield, or else we probably could have tongued. And it's just the idea that here they are hating my country, wanting to burn down our embassy, and I'm at the very front of this phalanx of cops, and they started punching and throwing crap. And I think the guy that I was in front of was really not happy with me because they refused to touch me. All the protesters in my area are throwing and landing their punches, and whatever weapons they've got are going around me. I didn't even get accidentally hit once. The cops around me, well, and not just around me, every cop there took the full brunt of everything. They just decided they weren't going to mess with the foreigner. And so I got
you're also like 3 feet taller than them, right? I mean, let's get real. Sam is a giant. Sam is very, very tall. I think we've established that. Yeah, but the average. I think the average Korean is like 5'5", 5'6", the man. So like you're close to a foot, if not more. Yeah.
I wish more good concerts came to Korea because I could see everything.
In Korea, Sam just has to put his arms up, and he could get those wavy arm men that you see at used car lots.
No, we have girls in skirts and high heeled tennis shoes for that. Yeah, no, they do not want me. They got
nobody wants to see you in a skirt and high. Well, I can't say nobody wants to see you in a skirt and high tennis shoe heels, but. Fewer than, so
yeah. Although you've seen me, but yeah, it was a great party. I drank a lot of soju for free. I didn't get beat up, despite like being in the epicenter of everything. And eventually it died down. I went home. They did not ever burn down our embassy. They eventually mellowed out a bit, and we never did figure out the whole why, what fors that these two poor girls died. I mean, it was a horrible thing, but we couldn't figure out. Like, it wasn't like the tank veered off and aimed for them or something nonsensical and horrible like that. They just somehow got in the middle of the convoy and died, and it was horrible.
Wow.
So that was my first ever protest. And I mean, what? Like, with an experience like that, it did not deter me from future ones.
Well, I mean, look, you basically were like the you were untouchable, man. It's like you had a superpower. Not only did you tower over everybody, but nobody would touch you, and or for fear of whatever. I mean, I wonder what it was. If it was like they were scared of you, or they were scared of hurting an American, which would be, maybe they're scared of reprisal from the United States, but. I don't know, man. Or maybe
And
they were just really
They
polite.
felt okay attacking their kids. I mean, they just this multiple thick line of 19 to 23-year-old dudes that are their brothers and sisters, their cousins. They felt okay with that.
Right.
But yeah, so that was my clean Korean protest. I got out of that smooth. I was a little bit lit from all the soju going around. I mean, it was, as far as protest goes, it was a highlight. I don't know why. I don't read Lonely Planet, but I assume that protests in Korea are not one of the things that make the book.
Right.
So yeah, I kind of bounced around after that. I'd make some of them in the city, but yeah, they weren't usually that big. Being the good husband that I am, my Chinese Korean wife told me or Korean Chinese wife told me that she'd never been to a protest. It's like, darling, I can fix that. So I took her up for a nice, and this is 5 years ago. We went up for a romantic weekend in Seoul. Took her to this, there's a really trendy shopping district called Myeongdong. It's a big, for Japanese and Chinese tourists, it's a giant place to go to. Lots of clothing, fashion stuff, lots of good street food, which takes me into there. Just a lot of packed back alleys of just crazy stuff. And it's right near the same area of the big palace, Gyeongbokgung, and our embassy. That area in front of our embassy is where most of the protests go, just because the main giant road leading up to the old palace and the president's house, it's a T road, and it ends in front of our place. That's in the Japanese embassy. And across the street from us is an opera house, and it's a very artsy neighborhood and political. Lots of embassies in the area, lots of really old restaurants from back in the day. And then not far away is Myeongdong. So we want to do some shopping and hanging out. And so I decided, hey, honey, since we're in the neighborhood, why don't we go on to Gwanghwamun, which is the name of the subway stop there, and do your first protest? Because they were having the biggest protest in the city since 2008 for the anti-beef protest, which was a lot of poop and nonsense.
Anti-beef?
Anti-beef. Anti-American beef.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I love me some Korean fucking barbecue, man.
Oh, hell yes. Now, in 2008, they had one of the most unfocused, nonsensical protests. There's a kind of like a Dateline 60-minute show there called PD Notebook. And they had an episode about, this is back during the mad cow scares.
Right.
And how some Americans had mad cow, and so American beef isn't safe. And we import a lot of American beef, and we feed it to our kids in the school, so we need to get that crap out of here now.
Right.
Well, the problem with this is that their reporting was way off the mark. The Americans they'd talked about getting or contracting mad cow disease, the human form of mad cow disease, had gotten it while in England.
Right.
There was no
big problem.
Exactly. And there are people that can't give blood because of that. If you go to Red Cross, I'm a frequent blood donor, which service warning to everybody out there in Weirdsville. Good luck if you get my blood. Enjoy those secondhand flash.
Hey, it may be the best thing for your body. You might grow some extra antibodies that you never knew you needed.
You will, however, fail a drug test.
Do they do that? Do they test for drug use when you do that shit, or is it's just kind of like, hey, I'm clean?
I think surely they would trust for I don't think like acid or mushrooms are floating around your bloodstream. Yeah. If they're smart, they're probably testing for oxy or whatever the current drug crisis is. But
gotcha.
Yeah, probably not.
Okay.
Well,
yeah.
I think that most people that like voluntarily give not give drugs, give blood.
I want to sign up.
People that voluntarily give blood are people who are, kind of health conscious and, think about stuff like that. Not so many,
Yeah.
You got a good idea there, the drug bank. I like that.
Yeah.
Donate your drugs today. There are children in the American Midwest that have never had mushrooms before. You can change that. You can donate.
You could be the
drugs.
first. Yeah.
Get a kid. Oh my God. And thus ends my foray into PSAs. We went to Myeongdong, this big shopping area, and this protest was nearby. And it was so we're going back, it was the biggest one since 2008, where the story from the story that I deviated from, 2008, because of the beef thing, 2 Korean, I think they were middle school girls, went up by our embassy and the president's house and all this, and sat in the middle of this boulevard. And there's like a big median place that has a big, beautiful statue of one of their admirals that had fought off the Japanese back in the day. And it's a big meeting place. And so these girls sat out there with candles and held their own like 2-person candlelight vigil. And every Korean in the country just got behind. They're like, oh, these girls are out there. They're protesting that they don't want this, mad cow infested American meat. It's not. And, so the whole country got behind these 2 girls, which I'd like to know what happened to them all these years later. And so, yeah, they were protesting us and our meat. And it was just this crazy thing. It was this just giant protest action because of a completely falsified news report. And they even found out it was later, and they didn't care.
Wow, that's crazy because you never hear ever anything about news being falsified and people just losing their shit over it, or news being accurate but people thinking that it's false and losing their shit over it. You never hear that here in the United States in the year 2020.
Yeah,
exactly. I've never heard of child sex dungeons and pizza parlors basements that don't have basements. Yeah, no, it's completely unbelievable.
Yeah,
birth certificate. No, that would never happen here.
Or giant satanic cults. If we want to go back even further, than heavy metal messages.
Right. Play Dungeons and Dragons and you'll become a Satanist. Hell, listen to one band and you're a gang member. Whoop whoop.
Yeah.
So yeah, they had this thing and it was crazy, and so that was like some giant protests. So move it around a few years later, and I'm out there with Chairman Wife, and we're like, let's go check this out since we're in the neighborhood, darling. And she never protests. They had tens of thousands, maybe 150,000 people, and it was a big protest. It was a government thing. There were a whole bunch of different groups: farmers, educators, a lot of stuff going on. So we're kind of getting closer, and we decided we'd just have a weekend out in the city. I mean, we lived like an hour southeast of Seoul, and kind of like going from Weatherford to the city for a weekend, and just a special night out. So I got a room in Seoul just so I could go, eat some street food with her and have, some protest action. So our hotel was ready by 3. We dropped off our gear. We prepared to go out for a little walkabout. And already at 3 p.m., man, the distant rumbling of chanting reached us as we neared the northeastern edge of this Myeongdong area. Curious, we crossed a busy street, only to find that the police had completely blocked off the opposite side of vehicular traffic. 8 lanes of desolate street faced us. The rumbling grew louder as we approached what looked to be a massive crowd. Tens of thousands of people had converged upon the plaza in front of Seoul City Hall, which is south of the president's house and our embassy. There's a drizzling rain. We stepped around the throngs of people seated on newspapers, torn apart cardboard boxes, and butt-sized fold-out yoga mats. To protect themselves from the falling sprinkle, most everyone sported a thin plastic disposable raincoat. Business of mobile coffee and food stands flourish, offering coffee, tea, beer, cola, water, odang, their little fishy bread on a stick, tteokbokki, their rice cakes in a spicy red sauce, cheap hot dogs on a stick, and assorted battered fried snacks. Ever the collectivistic society, people gathered in groups according to their special interests, waving flags, unfurling banners, and chanting together. Many even coordinated their rain gear. Cranes suspended speaker towers 20 feet above the masses behind a small stage. Speakers took turns riling up the crowd. Somebody released hundreds of yellow balloons on the opposite side of the plaza. These were undoubtedly to remind us of the hundreds of high school students who had died when the Sewol ferry had sunk in April of the previous year. They had this boat. It was a school trip.
I remember that.
Yeah, but they died because it was poorly loaded. It was uneven, and as it was flipping on its side and eventually upside down, the captain was telling everybody, stay in your cabins, don't go out. And because everybody there is so conditioned to heed the word of authority, all these kids died. The captain got out, but a couple hundred kids, the majority of the population of one high school died.
Wow.
And it was just this national tragedy. And this will eventually lead into another protest I got to go to, my last protest in Korea, when they ousted their first female president because she didn't fly down there, put a knife in her mouth, Rambo style, and save them. Crazy poop that'll happen later on. But the ferry, again, a horrific national tragedy. And so it's never far from their minds. Anything else that goes on, there's going to be some yellow for Sewol. So we left the realm of relative calm of the plaza and moved north towards Gwanghwamun, the main gate to the Gyeongbok Palace, the traditional king's palace up there. Around the plaza, south of it, sits the U.S. Embassy, the Sejong Center for the Performing Arts, named for King Sejong, who also has a statue there and also helped create the Korean language, written language. Statue of Admiral Yi Sun-shin, who fought off the Japanese and way down south back in the day, a very genius admiral. So the president's house is up behind the palace. Protest organizers chose storming President Park's home as their lofty goal for the day. We had picked the perfect time to move on. All around us, groups simultaneously rose to begin their march north. I doubt any of them moved very far for a while. Tens of thousands of protesters clogged the 10-lane wide boulevard, organized once again into groups. I saw taxi driver and rice grower unions. They'd come together seeking labor reform. Of course, their demands weren't the only ones hoping to be met that day. Besides labor reformists and those still seeking justice from the ferry's sinking, others had come to protest a recent decision by the president to begin exclusively using state-issued history textbooks in middle and high schools. A gathering of this magnitude easily attracts unrelated folks hoping to find ears receptive to their particular messages. Several of these took up positions on the outskirts of those gathered at City Hall. The most visible of these was a religious group there to warn people of the, quote, evils of homosexuality. They are to mention, Koreans are very, we sold them on white Jesus very early on. They're almost evenly divided between Christianity and Buddhism. So when you go into the cities, there's red crosses on all sorts of small office buildings where the owners get discounts for giving cheap rooms to churches. So there's office building churches. But yeah, they've gone on the far right side, again, anti-homosexual groups there. And they put their messages in English and in Korean, but they also had graphically explicit photographs of nearly nude men in some sort of like S&M get-ups. Apparently, like S&M is only for homosexuals. They had a lone woman singing hymns into a small PA system. One of their signs read, "Homosexuality is the sin revolting against God." So again, they can't even like. They could surely find like one homophobic foreigner there to get their English correct.
Right.
I mean, I for years I wanted to go around and correct all the English on menus at restaurants and bars, because I have more than once ordered a rum cock from places.
I bet you have.
I've had a lot of rum delivered straight out of Atlanta, but just let us, especially if you feel strongly about something, let somebody check your English.
Yeah.
So this was a day of like protests that you could basically just bring your group along. Everybody's going to protest whatever they want to protest all at the same time.
Oh yeah. And this was a strange one because it wasn't like we're burning down the American embassy protests. It wasn't. Yeah, usually like everybody there is in one single-minded group. This was like everybody had their own agenda. We want lower tariffs on rice. We want higher wages for taxi drivers. Get rid of the gays. Education. Whatever their thing was with the textbooks. Yeah, just all this stuff. There were so many, dozens and dozens of different groups there that had their own message and their own protest.
All right.
And
with crossed with ballpark foods that are being sold, which is the way to protest in my book.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Pull some taco trucks and I'll go to any place to protest.
Oh God, I was tacos. Although I love their street food, man. I'll tteokbokki any day, but yeah. They fill up the entire boulevard across, like from our embassy and in front of the Blue House and the Gyeongbokgung, the palace. So the crowd thins a little bit. We get into the sidewalk, and anticipating the largest turnout for protesting in 7 years, the police had brought out 700 of their buses to use as barriers parked nose to butt along the curbs of these streets.
Damn.
The Korean protests in the 80s were phenomenal. They during the dictatorship eras, they would have these crazy protests in universities where the students would take over the campus and hold like the university president prisoner for a while or hostage. Their stuff got violent, like the what do they call them? Well, now they're the 586. People that are in their 50s, went to university in the 80s, born in the 60s. They call them 586ers.
Okay.
Of course, granted, it used to be 486ers, used to be 386ers for whatever their age they were at. But yeah, these people grew up getting tear gassed at university and high, crazy protests there. And so this is just carried on through the years. So the police know, man, they bring up, like I said, just all these buses, and they park them where you can't spit between the front end and the back end of the buses. And they've got drop-down armor, screens across the window fall into place, just all this crazy gear. And so they block in where this road ends. They just make it so you're just trapped in here. And they're protecting, the buildings around. Boom. They halted the advance north to the president's house and the palace. This time, they'd introduced some weird cargo trucks, almost like a fancy bread truck, outfitted with sections of security walls that they deployed once they lined them up across the street. And so all of a sudden, like these walls, like on a wall, on arms came down from these trucks, and it was pretty formidable. And it took 5 of these trucks to block the road. And so took my wife up to the front of this, like, hey, let's just see what's going on. And there was like this dead zone of 10 yards between the protesters and the police wall. And you'd see a few people meander up there, kind of checking out the scene. There were some journalists, some randos, had their cell phones, had their DSLRs. And definitely the people that were there documenting everything outnumbered the protesters at the front of this action.
Oh, wow.
So picking the protesters out from the couples taking a strange path on their dates, because this is a very like date night area, it didn't present much of a challenge. A lot of the people there protesting had their faces covered. Some wore, they had their propaganda for their particular group. Looking back to the view of this just solid sea of people stretching out as far as I could look. Flags waved high above them. People attached them to the ends of these ubiquitous 10-foot-long fishing poles that normally use to do some fishing out of their nasty green river that separates the city north and south. One older man gives me a good shove. And so for a while now, I've had a press pass. So I'm a member of the Oklahoma Press Association. Thanks to the Weatherford Daily News. Woo woo. Like I go out and have some adventures. I write up a story, send it to them. I get like a free subscription for the year. They get news that they wouldn't get anywhere else because I'm not part of Associated Press, Reuters, any of that stuff. So yeah, it's just a wild thing that I get this piece of plastic to put in my wallet and get access to things I might not.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's served me well over the years on occasion. So I flashed that out, and they responded with, "Oh, hands off!" All of a sudden, if I had the pass, man, nobody wanted to touch me, man. Someone say, "Oh, don't touch." So some people like pulled the guy who thought I was causing shit. They pulled him off of me as I'm sitting there with a drink in hand, because it's my cocktail hour. A trio of people eventually ran up to the barricade with a stack of propaganda papers and glue sticks, and quickly tried smearing their paste on there and getting their handwritten messages on there. Few minutes afterwards, people would come up and try and kick these reinforced barriers and then scurry back to the crowd. We had a small truck of speakers, a small truck with a tower of speakers on our side. And it just broadcasted angry messages to try and rile the folks up with each repetition or shout. And of course, more people started coming up to the wall. The crowd intensified. Behind the barricade, long arms extended above. Some hydraulic arms looked like they were off a fire truck, except they were painted in the police colors. Each of these ended with a water cannon nozzle and had a video camera encased in durable housing. The tone and the pace of the speeches, chants, anti-government police invectives rose until they reached a crescendo marked by the first response from the police behind their barricades. They offered threats of water and pepper spray along with other useful information I couldn't understand with my limited Korean skills. This managed to set the protesters off like a starter's pistol. Crowd's restraint broke. Leaders at the front began waving everyone to rush the wall because, that's smart. Hesitant at first, folks increasingly gained confidence as each subsequent group to run forward increased in size and boldness. And it didn't take long for the water cannons to hose down the crowd. Everyone but Chairman Wife and I had on rain gear and didn't seem to care as much, especially once they figured out it was only water at this time. People scattered from getting hit directly but didn't go far. More aggressive protesters attacked a handful of officers stationed at the southernmost police bus. Clad in riot gear, they reminded me of some twisted castle wall guard as they repeatedly repelled two groups slamming ladders ineffectually against the side of the bus. Several people swung extremely long bamboo poles at the cops in hoping of giving the ladder crews a chance. And at this point, my lovely, very tolerant wife thought it was advisable for her to find some high ground. from which to view the events that I was, decided I was going to stick around for. And what was crazy about all this is that although this is happening in the middle of this big street, it's not like the protests here where things get out of hand and like whole neighborhoods fall. It was in the street and it was contained in the street. She ended up going to a coffee shop on the other side of the sidewalk from where we're at, and went in and got a coffee and sat there and watched this crap until it ended. That was it. I mean, she was like 20, 30 feet from the sidewalk.
Wow. So they just boxed. So they brought out all these buses. They lined it up. They blocked it off and they made a wall. What were they just trying to protect or stop people from going further into the city, or were they just trying to contain it all in that area, or like
they didn't want the people rushing the president's house. But it was but I mean, they had to get through the old palace to get there. I mean, of course you could have just gone around it, but
Hey everybody, you're listening to the What's Your Weird Story podcast. You probably knew that already because you're listening or downloaded to the episode off of your iTunes or your Spotify or whatever place you get your podcast from. We want to thank you for listening. We also want to remind you to like us, follow us, subscribe to us, make sure that you get your new podcast episode every week. We'd also like to ask you to rate and review so that we can grow our audience and we can have more friends, we can have more stories. So thanks for listening to What's Your Weird Story. So let's talk about the Arab Spring, because this is really like this is a huge kind of event, that the big major cultural change and huge societal change in that part of the world, and you somehow ended up on the front page of the Egyptian Times or whatever it was.
With the weather for Daily News, close enough.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I was in the middle of it all, but yeah, man, riot like an Egyptian. Well, so this whole winter, it was my winter vacation for my university in Korea, and I spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia hanging out with my hash friends, and I just had a lot of people spread out. And I finally had a lot of people that were living up in and around the Middle East. And so I had 8 weeks off. I was like, all right, man, we're going to just go do all this stuff. And now I'm not, like I said about the Lonely Planet earlier, like I don't look at stuff beforehand. I book a ticket, and I get there, and I go to a bar and, talk to people. And I had a really good friend of mine from the hash she's going to hate this. Her proper hash name is Countessa of Anal Crisco. And she was living in Saudi at the time, working, doing her master's. And she had some vacation time and was going to be in Beirut, which definitely looked a lot different in 2013 than it does today.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. It's sad.
Man, that is sad. Sorry, hearts go out to the people of Beirut. That just happened as we record. That happened yesterday, and that was it's wild. But yeah,
such a beautiful city and amazing people, man. It was horrific to watch that yesterday. The sad thing, they've been through a lot, and they'll get through this, but it's going to change them. But
yeah, that's
where my 8-week odyssey began. I met up with this girl and a couple of her coworkers. It was a wild start to an 8-week adventure, because her coworkers, it was these two gay gentlemen that cannot be gay in Saudi Arabia. So they were so happy to have a hotel room together and just be able to hang out. And so they had no interest in her. So that's fine. I haven't seen my friend in a while. So we went out and explored a lot together and ate some good food and just had a great time. I mean, she's one of my closest friends. It was amazing to be able to see her there. So I moved on. Like I said, I had friends at this one period in my life just spread out in so many places. Three good friends of mine were living in Amman, Jordan. So I went and hung out with my friend Beth, that, like all Beths I know, I never call Beth. So I stayed with her for a week and went out to went out in the desert and stayed out like where Lawrence Arabia was, out in the Wadi Rum, and some like yurts. It was really dope. Just drove out with some guy into the middle of nowhere to hang out. I had some really good food, really good people. Got to go to, of course, the name would elude me right now, Indiana Jones in Last Crusade.
Petra.
Petra, thank you. I kept thinking of the Parthenon, like that's Greece. Yeah, I went to Petra, and it was almost abandoned. I've got pictures down there where the only people in my photographs are people who work there. It just had a great day there. Just it was an amazing time in Jordan. Did a weird time in Israel, going across from there on the land crossing, where getting in and out of Israel were two of the most painful things in my life. It took me going to Israel on a bus took over 3 hours to cross the border, because they wanted to know why I was there and where I was going, and my usual answers of, because I was in Jordan and you're next door, did not work very well. They went through every item I had, pulled apart, like almost down to the stitching, every piece of gear I had. And as I'm sitting on a bench at this bus station at the border waiting for them, I write a lot. I've got over 170 journals that I've just filled with nonsensical thoughts. So I naturally pull this out of my pocket and start jotting down notes. And one of the agents at Customs comes over and grabs it from me so they can go read it. And they're like bringing it back and asking me, like, what does this say? And it was crazy. So I get in there, mundane week, couple weird stories from there, but get out. Going through the airport was hell. I showed up hours early and almost didn't make my flight. Got on at Qatar, where a good friend of mine lived, hung out with him and his wife for a while, evented in the desert for a bit, saw some multi-million-dollar yachts. And so all of this led up to, got through Turkey, went into Europe, and had a great time in Bulgaria. Finally, I ended up in Egypt. Hell yeah, man, I want to see the pyramids, because who doesn't want to see the pyramids?
Yeah, dude.
So I've got, it was a hostel that had like proper-ish hotel rooms.
Okay.
So kind of a combo there. So basically like a cheap hotel room in a hostel. And the guys were pretty nice. It was in this, the building was pretty sketch. The elevator, you didn't feel like it was going to get you up or down every time. But they're really nice guys. I had a good time there. You can buy duty-free booze in Egypt, so I had some quarts. And I'm going to where downtown Cairo is Tahrir Square, and on the north edge of that is the National Museum, like the big museum. So I'm like, all right, we'll start off there. And this is all like a couple blocks from the Nile River. So I'm cruising up there. I'm going down the street, and there's just blockades, like concrete blocks that are stacked twice my height. Like, all right, well, I chose the wrong direction. I'll go down a different street. And it kept not working out very well. So as I went along, like, people would call out, "What your name? Where you from?" as I hiked through the town. So third day, I get myself back in Tahrir Square, also known as Liberation Square, Martyr Square, Midden Square, Liberation Square, lots of names. And it was filled with tents. It was just this big circle in the center of the city outside the big National Museum. And there was a banner asking Obama for help. This is 2013. For help fighting the implementation of Sharia law, the Muslim law, because women were against having to wear hijabs there. And the other people just milling about. Of course, there was the random because again, this is Egypt. This is the signs, not me saying this, but there are definitely quite a few "fuck Israel" signs and graffiti tags.
Right.
Not a lot of Israeli fans in Egypt.
I was getting ready to say there's quite a bit of a contentious relationship, maybe between the two countries of Egypt and Israel, going pretty far back.
Exactly. So even when you go to Egypt, they don't even they won't put, or you can ask them not to put their stamp in your passport. So like stashed away in the farthest corner of my bags back in the hotel, I had they put the Visa stamp on a separate sheet of paper for you. So I had that stashed. Like you would have had to have combed through everything I had to know that I'd been there beforehand.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it would have been fugly. So there were vendors sitting around. There were nuts for sale and tea and pretzel bread and snacks and, of course, cigarettes. Cigarettes everywhere.
Yeah. They're big,
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So I've been going up into this mess for a few days, and I'm trying to figure out, like, what can I do while I'm in town. I take a Nile River cruise aboard a ship called the Lady Diana. And that night, I learned what's going on thanks to an Egyptian guide of a Taiwanese man that they seated next to me. And then, granted, there weren't many people there at all. The dinner cruise was nowhere near full. But they were like, well, everybody needs to sit with somebody. So they threw me with some guy that he was Taiwanese. He'd moved to the States in the 70s. And he was just hanging out on vacation. He'd hired a driver. And so we were talking, and the driver was pretty cool. The Taiwanese American was pretty cool. And so the driver's name was Mani. And he starts explaining. So we're talking about what we've been doing. I was like, I've been going downtown. And his eyes get wide. He's like, what? And he's just like, yeah, they're people down there. They're getting spots. It's a 2-year anniversary of what he called the Egyptian Revolution. And 18 years later, Mubarak was out of power, and he's like, whatever you do, well, you shouldn't have been going down there already. Don't go again on Friday, because that's going to kick off. That is the second anniversary. It's also an Islamic holiday, and so people are going to be out in force, and the Muslim Brotherhood will probably be out. He's like, everything imaginable possible for a 6'4" tall, blatantly white dude with long hair, not the place you should be.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Obviously, I took his advice completely to heart and ignored it.
Right. As I would
Oh,
expect
yeah.
from you, Sam.
Of course. All we need is acid. Is there acid or mushrooms in this?
No, I was lucky I had whiskey.
This
I
is
just
Egypt.
had
It
a
would
man.
probably would have been hashish. I think that.
Well, I would have been a lot better with that. A little mental expansion would have been all right. But yeah, they blocked off a lot of this downtown area around the square, and at one point, like, there's burned out cars already on my side of the blocks. I'm climbing over like 12 feet concrete walls to get to this stuff at points. Finally, like, McDonald's and KFC down there started shutting down. I'm like, that's like, man, if American capitalism can't survive this, what chances do I have? Really, you guys are against? You don't want a Big Mac? Oh shit! So there are some bars, like they're not completely. It's not like some of the other places in the Middle East. I did find some bars here and there. I found a place called Pub 28. Had some drinks, ate. Finally, I get back to here. There's small fires burning everywhere, and I don't understand. Like, it's the Middle East. Granted, now parts of where I was at, I completely underpacked as I usually do. I went to some cold places in the Middle East. It was not cold here. It was not bad at all. But there's fires everywhere. And they told me they had these fires because when the police started shooting all of the tear gas, the smoke and the heat from the fires pull it in and take it out.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Strategic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So just, start a little tiny fire wherever you're at in a protest if the tear gas starts flowing. So they had put up a new 10-foot tall concrete barricade on parts of the square from the day before I'd been there. And part of this blocked the path that I'd been taking up from my hotel on a daily basis. You had more flags, more signs, homemade effigies hung from the lamppost with care. Hayes, a low-grade mace, assaulted me. I had bought a surgical mask off a guy for 2 Egyptian pounds, about 30 cents. I didn't know what else to do that night. I didn't have my camera on me, so I had my back then, and it was a Samsung Galaxy Tab, their first, the selfie tab. So it was a monstrous thing. Yeah. So I just put on some Rage Against the Machine in my earbuds and walked along. People were throwing stones and broken up concrete across, over the barricades. And then every time you start hearing these thump, 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 thump. And it was the tear gas canisters being fired by the police from behind the barricades. So, well versed in the difference between the sounds of gunfire and launching canisters, I stood my ground. Besides, the projectors arced well overhead and behind us where people kicked them out of harm's way. It really didn't help or hurt that I was quite drunk at the time. Peering over the middle section of missing blocks, I could only make out the glows of light from indistinct sources. And this is when it all began to look like a massive outdoor music festival. Laser lights cut through the smoke from vantage points offered by the high buildings on the western side of the square, mixing with the music and chants blaring from a stage set up near the Hardys. They had a Hardy. Not Carl's Jr. Not Carl's Jr.
Hardee's.
So,
with the original, hey, might I add, with the original mushroom Swiss burger, which I still love to this day.
So I was armed with this little. It was a gift from the Hash in Korea that I've been using for years, and it was basically a camel bag backpack that goes with me on my travels. And so I bought a camel pack to put in there. And so I, had whiskey and a mixture of stuff. So I'm just walking around covertly, taking sips, enjoying the scene. So I go home. I awake to an eerie scene on Friday morning. Shopkeepers had shuttered most every shop in the city for the holiday and or upcoming riots. Mats laid out in front of the sidewalks of mosque provided prayer space for those who couldn't squeeze into the overflowing buildings. I received my second dose of tear gases in as many days. Even more new blockades had forced me to take a much longer path around to Tahrir Square. Located less than an unimpeded 5-minute walk from my hotel, the new precautions taken by the government turned my trip into one of over 20 minutes. And that Friday, it didn't begin at the square for me. Instead, I walked southeast to Abdeen Palace, followed a large group of protesters marching into the square. Weaving in and out along the way, I followed their shouting and chanting to a smaller square. The energy increased as a second group marched in and joined them. And they were coming in for the final march into Tahrir. One of the guards asked to check my bag though I was entering a concert. Or I guess an anti-government protest. I don't know. A quick glance at my obvious non-Egyptianness, and the disinterested guy gave me my bag and sent me on my way. My bag more or less checked, I wove through throngs of people. The amount of items for sale had increased to include Guy Fawkes mask, ski mask, and SpongeBob SquarePants T-shirts.
Was that? I don't remember that, but was that like a symbol or something that was adopted, or is it just that was there?
Somebody had it, and surely somebody's going to buy it. You got to represent the pineapple, baby.
Yeah.
I traded a 1-pound coin for a large pretzel off a stack sitting on a wooden pole. Shops ringing the eastern and southern sides of the square. were mostly open, including KFC, Hardee's, and a Pizza Hut. Only McDonald's had fully shuttered its door at this point, despite being the farthest away from the square of the four. The majority of the crowd was having a grand old time, shouting, hugging, chanting, singing, drinking tea, eating. Every fourth person held their cell phone aloft to capture a piece of their respective history. Men climbed lamp and signposts to wave flags and display banners. I strolled through the masses toward the path to the Intercontinental Hotel to see how the scene had changed since Thursday, and changed it had. The entirety of the square, including the paths out, had filled to capacity. If this truly had been a music festival, then I had discovered the mosh pit in front of the heavy metal stage. Wow. The police had rebuilt the Western Wall since yesterday. Few people climbed it and danced around like idiots. Instead of a repeat performance of the previous night's laser light show, they chose to focus their outrage on the wall next to and perpendicular to the westernmost wall. So we had a pretty decent light show. I mean, there was no Pink Floyd, no Zeppelin. It wasn't a planetarium, but it still wasn't bad. I respect to anybody out there in Weirdsville who knows why I said planetarium without a T. Standing room crowd lobbed rocks and broken chunks of concrete at the police over the wall. Astonishingly, the cops launched their own salvo of improvised projectiles back at us. You'd think they'd have budget for something useful. The back and forth continued until the thumps of the shotgun-fired tear gas cans signaled the escalation of the party. Demonstrators around me beat a hasty retreat. I caught the stampede on my camera. And then one of the last to get back to relative safety of the main mass had a limp child in his arms. And I got a picture of this. It was the end of my video. Paramedics were on hand to quickly treat the child. But that guy coming out of the smoke with a kid in his arms running towards me was going to be the picture on the front page of the main Egyptian newspaper the next morning.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like I said, I've got this video of him running out of this cloud of tear gas with this limp kid in his arms, and boom! I was like, wait. The next morning, I saw a newspaper. I was like, I recognize that, and it wasn't until I saw my video later. I was like, oh yeah, because I got the same shot, but 20 feet from behind the photographer.
Wow.
Which was nuts because this whole event. If you go back and look at like all the photography from it, the video, if it has a Western name attached to it on the byline, it's from the hotels that are up around this area as they do it from the safety of their rooms or the balconies, whatever. Anything that's ground level has a very Islamic, Egyptian, Middle Eastern name attached to it. So yeah, I think I'm the only person with a byline during those days that had a non-local name. So yeah, I probably shouldn't have been out there doing this.
Well, yeah, I mean that's one of those things too, where it's like it could go either way. It's like
really,
because you're caught in such chaos that there may not be. They probably don't give a shit about what you're doing, but if for some reason something were to happen to where you were taken into custody or something like that, it could have got a little dicey.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. I mean, hell, I was a very, very young man at this time. I mean, hell, I was only in my mid-30s. What are you gonna do? Had to check it out.
Of course.
So as I go through, like, people were wanting to take pictures with me because I was the only honky there.
Right.
People kept holding the big thing for pictures that weekend was, or for selfies, I guess, was pictures of yourself holding spent tear gas canisters. I tried to grab one or two, but they still had gas coming out of them. Drink with a British dude back at the hostel. Just had to, get the tear gas out of my body, so we figured whiskey would handle that.
Yeah.
So we tried to watch Al Jazeera English broadcasts and get an idea of what was going on from outside of what we could see.
Right.
I said, screw it. At this point, fairly drunk, I put my surgical mask back on and got out on the street. Went back into the middle of it all. And it was just white clouds. You couldn't see, you couldn't do anything. So I finally returned to the room for the night. But yeah, it was horrible. If you've never been tear gassed, it's not the greatest thing.
Yeah. I remember the reports that were coming out at that time about how people were helping because they shut down all forms of communication and like the internet, like they shut it down. And they were like figuring out ways to get the information to these guys on how to rig their phones or something. It was like they'd rig their phones up to get onto the internet or something. I don't remember exactly, but it was like this whole thing where it was like one of the first times in human history where like, the people were able to overcome, a massive shutdown of communication by, people, contacting them, I guess, through their phones somehow and figuring out how to get the information. It was really a heavy time. I remember that pretty.
Satellite triangulation and
right.
No laws against them scooping up the info.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wild.
And that was just a couple days into it, man. I took a day off because, I didn't come here just to get tear gassed in Cairo.
Right.
I took a day trip. I hopped the train out to Alexandria.
Wow.
How
was that?
Grabbed a drive. Alexandria was amazing.
Yeah.
Because again, during this time, the closer I got to Egypt, the less people there were. So I had a really quiet day. I hired a taxi driver. And I went around the Roman Theater, the Citadel of Qaibai, Mumtaz Palace, El Murisi Abu Abbas Mosque. It was a hell of a day. Took the train back into Cairo as night fell. And, of course, by this point, things had started turning worse and worse.
Right.
Only a handful of people came to meet me out of the dense haze at the end of a quarter-mile long clear stretch of this road in this usual business district. Tiny fire in the middle of the street tended by a teenage male was the final landmark before the street opened onto the square. It would be generous to say that the crowd had thinned to a third of Friday's night capacity mob. Relating it again to festivals, it looked as though the majority had blown their wad the night before. Like there's multi-day festivals, there's a hangover night, and this was it.
Yeah.
Both sides, civilian and government, had stepped up their respective games before the morning and had brought with it a slight reprieve, if not at least a period to regroup and recoup on both sides.
That was Saturday. That was the Saturday. That was the next day. Okay.
Yes. And so yeah, it was like a quieter day. You're thinking, all right, here we go. So I'm checking out, again in the center of all this craziness, and I'm on the southeast side of the square. I'm going to take a couple pics before I head back to the western wall where all the madness had been going on before. And some guy in his, maybe late 20s, early 30s comes up to me, and he asks, "American?" Yes. And this ended up kicking off a 40-minute educational conversation between this gentleman named Sharif and I. He told me about having studied in Europe and having lived in Australia and having had a Danish girlfriend. He's a lazy bastard. He only speaks 5 languages. Shit. Like I can embarrassingly. I speak English. I can embarrassingly order off a menu at a Mexican restaurant. Like 5 languages. Oh, good. One of those moments when you're like, "Oh, I am so American at this point."
Yeah.
So he decided that he was going to educate me in what had been going on, and he was just so surprised to see a honky in the middle of this craziness. Because again, I was the only dude down there. So there's like little fires burning. He's the one who told me about the tear gas.
Right.
He warned me about, because I decided I was about on my way home. He said, don't plow through the middle of the mob like I'd been doing. Violence had started going off in the last day or so. I guess I'd just been lucky. And now, like, civilians of the opposition had started infiltrating the party and upsetting the scene. There had been fights. People had been getting stabby. He gave me a very stern warning about venturing out in the square. Around us, folks angry that vendors were trying to use this event to scrape out a living manhandled most of the push carts out of the square to the dismay. And then he started telling me a story about the past. So he had been out 2 years ago for a very different scene during the Arab Spring. And I was like, so what was different between now and then? Well, while it was easy to make a comparison because that one had dragged on for more than 2 weeks, he did tell me his story after buying us both glasses of tea from a 9-year-old's push cart. The kid drew our tea from one of those like 3 towering stainless steel tanks while dangling a half-burnt cigarette from his mouth because everybody smokes. Again, I asked, like, this is not just me, because I'm not good at ages for children. From the time they're born until the time they can either get me a beer from the fridge, mix me a drink, or drive me home drunk, I'm not sure what their ages are. But I made sure to ask. Like, he was like, no, this kid's 9 years old.
Wow.
He decided he would educate me about what had happened 2 years previous. And he whips out his wallet. He takes out an oversized business card, and it had a passport-sized photo of another 20-something-year-old Egyptian man on the front next to a load of Arabic script. The back showed rows of tiny headshots amounting to more than 20 people, maybe 24 people. And he told me that the big picture on the card was his brother, and that the others are people from his neighborhood that were murdered by the police 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So he went on to explain how he, his brother, and a friend had come down to Tahrir Square during the 2011 demonstrations to show their support. Police snipers began firing on the masses. People split. Sharif and his friend lost the brother. And then Sharif took a shot from the police. At this point, he paused and he looks around. And he says, okay, it's dark. You are a man. He unzips his pants, pulling them and his underwear down so that I could see what looked to be a second belly button in the pubic bush just to the right of his baby maker. They shot me with rubber bullet. I couldn't walk for 2 months. Yeah, he took a rubber bullet into the thigh, just right of the junk.
Damn. Oh my God.
So, like many families in ensuing insanity and its aftermath, his family couldn't find his brother. Mubarak left office 18 days after the start of the protests. My new friend Sharif's brother wasn't identified until 28 days later. Sitting in a room for 4 weeks and made it incredibly difficult for numerous people to identify their respective family members. Replacing the card in his wallet, Sharif wished me well and turned to leave, visibly upset, but still with the energy and determination needed to fight the system. Swiveling, he asked me how I planned on getting back to my hotel when I got around to living. He immediately nixed my plans to go south after skirting the coils of barbed wire laid out across most of this area. Now, I had traveled this road multiple times daily due to the lack of people on the street. Plus, I like the walls of graffiti extending 200 plus yards. Sharif said that the absence of people is exactly what made the street dangerous. He'd heard tales of small gangs beating and rolling people braving the lonely street. So I was like, how should I get home? Go through the square center and go to Corniche. The Nile Corniche is the road running the length of the eastern bank of the Nile River. But didn't you tell me earlier that the square was dangerous? Yes, but you would be okay. So we bid each other well and parted ways. I continued to walk on through the square, feeling the weight of the discontent around me. Tear gas just, proliferated. No one molested me, but neither did anyone stop me for a picture this time. Tear gas thickened as I closed an uninhabited quadrant. The gas was the heaviest I'd experienced. Liquids poured from all 5 holes on the front of my face as I pushed through to the Nile. I mean, if you've never been tear gassed, it turns you into a sobbing child. I mean,
yeah,
your eyes start watering. You start just having streams of snot coming out of your nose, and you can't breathe well through that. So then you just all right, I'll just open my mouth, and then you're drooling on top of that through your open, gaping mouth. It was very pleasant, very sexy.
Yeah.
So I'd gone into this mess, and it's uncomfortable. And this is the worst the tear gas had been through all these days. And at this point, I was like, all right, I've gone too far to turn back. And especially thinking Sharif's ideas here, this is, I should go this way. I'm taking his advice. I mean, he showed me his testicles. He's got to be on the level. Yeah. So I continued.
Yeah. So basically, right here, we need to just pause and say that if you need to get Sam to do something and you want him to actually follow the instructions, you've got to show him your balls. When in doubt. All right.
I don't know.
Just in case, everybody, if you meet Sam somewhere and you're in the middle of a protest, just and if you're a man, if
there's a flat earther listening to this broadcast, show me your testicles. I might join your side. I could go full out, man. Flat earther, and that Nazis are living in the Antarctic mountains that surround our flat planet. You name it, man. I could go in this. I need to test it.
Oh, careful what you wish for, man.
Yeah.
That's why I'm glad this is on the radio and it's not a video.
Yeah.
And I lie about my size. I'm actually 5'2". I have a scar across my eye like Snake Plissken.
You forget that we've posted images of you already for this.
Those are deep state. Not real at all. I'm a leprechaun. So I decided to walk on the backside of the Intercontinental Hotel. And this is my escape plan. I'm trying to get towards the Nile River so I can go south and break back into my hotel. And there's 6 teenage boys hurling rocks at a contingent of police officers in riot gear more than 100 yards away from them, stationed along the Nile River. My sudden presence surprised them in more ways than one. I offered them remnants of the water that I had on me. They took a break from throwing rocks and concrete to chat with me for a while. I explained that I was just trying to get down the road where, their ineffectual tosses were landing. And so 2 of the guys told me, yeah, just go ahead, approach the cops with caution. 2 of them advised me to wait, and 2 said nothing. So I took the former pair of advice. I just started slowly advancing. Just going down a couple 100 yards of the street with my hands raised high above my head. And again, there's just a whole line of cops with weapons pointed at these guys 200 yards out throwing rocks at them. People don't throw rocks 200 yards. It was nonsense. So I get a ways down. Can't see them, but I can definitely see the weapons pointed in my direction. I started feeling actual fear for the first time that week, despite all the crap I'd been through. So one of the boys finally shouts at me to stop, and I turn. And he waves me back. So I reunite with this group of kids, And they told me, hey, yeah, the police will leave after 5 minutes. Like there's only a few of us here, and we're not doing anything but rocks. And they're like, yeah, they would have shot you if you kept going. I said, dude, nice joke. I like you. The best scam I'd experienced so far. The other scams I experienced are hanging on the bathroom wall at my mom's house. So sure enough, officers got out, marched south following their armored SWAT vehicles. A few minutes later, my new sort of friends waved as I took off to follow their empty spot at the end of the road. I got nearly maybe a half the distance, and all of a sudden I started hearing like crackles behind me. The boys had returned to throwing rocks in my direction, which, you know, weren't going to hit me. A couple did roll past my feet. But yeah, they just, I guess, just people who like to throw rocks westwardly. So I got on the Corniche, the Nile River Road, and got through different groups of police stationary, you know, checkpoints, whatever. They looked like the edge of a war zone. Finally got back to my hotel, finished what I had to drink, and passed out. I wake up the next morning. It's my last day in town. And it was, well, I guess I wasn't used to getting up that early, but I had to fly out. There was an uneasy quiet. So I get my luggage on the street. I grab a taxi. I'm going to the airport. And of course, like I couldn't have just like one last moment of quiet. We start going through the crowds, getting tear gassed again through the car, going through the armored police vehicles. Shattered concrete blocks necessitated a detour through this mess. And this dude's battered. And when I say a taxi, like there's a lot of cars that are quote unquote taxis. And again, these are in the beautiful days before Uber and Lyft and Grab and Snatch and whatever the fudge. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just a guy with a car.
Yeah,
right.
That I paid money to take me. So his battered behemoth, you know, got us under an underpass where people were shouting and tossing projectiles. They don't know what we're doing. It's just, hey, there's a car, throw shit at them.
Yeah.
We get through that. We get through another police barricade. I finally get to the on-ramp of the October Bridge. And I got, for one last time, to see the muted activity in Tahrir Square as the people milled about coping with the early rays of light of a new day, looking forwards to yet another day of struggle for peace and rock tossing, and that would be difficult to bring about. But yeah, it was a wild trip.
Wow.
I did get to see, granted, not in that, I did get to see the pyramids in possibly one of the most majestic ways ever.
Yeah.
So there were no tourists, any of those people. No tourists.
That's cool.
I got to go out to the pyramids, and the guy that my hotel hired for me as a driver that day, he takes me out there. And if you ever just look at pictures of the pyramids in their relation to the town of Cairo,
yeah,
the city goes to the edge. It's insane. Like you think it's on this, you know, majestic desert emptiness wasteland. No, the city ends at the gates.
Wow.
And as we're driving out, he passes by an apartment building. He's like, that's where my wife lives. We are first cousins. We met at a family reunion. Like, oh, shit.
All right. Fair enough.
Fair enough.
How close are you able to get to the pyramids themselves? Like, you're not walking up to them or anything, are you?
Oh, absolutely. So
really? Okay.
The Great Pyramids, at any given time, one of them is closed for rehabilitation, repairs.
Right.
And so luckily the Great Pyramid was open when I got there. And so when I got in on I want to say it's a south gate where all the housing is, where you go from neighborhood to entrance.
Okay. And
so I got in there, and the guy lets me out, and he's like, all right, I'll meet you. Like, you'll know where the end is at. It's this giant park. Mm-hmm. And so he's like, yeah, I'll find you. I'm like, oh, shit, man, I hope. I trust you. But he was connected with the hotel, so I was okay. So I get in there, and they make you take somebody with you. And not because it's an official policy, but it's like the scam policy. So I've got this elderly dude with me, and this is at a time when there's no tourists. I mean, crap is not happening because of everything going on.
Right.
So we walk out through the sands, and he does point out some things. And so I'm having to pay to get in the park. I have to pay this guy. And he's like, hey, that's the Queen Chambers. And he barely speaks any English. And so he's trying to tell me that's the Queen Chambers, and, a little extra, you can go down there. I'm like, well, screw it. Like, how many times I'm going to be in the pyramids?
Right.
So we crawl down there, and it's because it's I don't know if this is a sexist thing, but they put the girls underground. So we had to go down, and it was basically like just sliding down. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to get back up.
Yeah.
And you're just in a hole in the ground.
Holy shit.
There's no decoration. You're just like, oh shit, I'm underground in Egypt.
Right.
Which is still pretty damn cool.
Right.
Yeah.
We get out, I get to the pyramids, and he finally realizes, like, I'm not really into him, so we depart after I gave him the tip that I had to give. And I go into the pyramid, and the pyramids are not made for tourism. It's a tomb that somehow these great, amazing leaders are supposed to come out of. And I wish one of them had, because I would have liked to have known how they'd done it. I mean, think about it. The thing was filled with traps, although people got around that and stole most everything in them. But what we got to go into was this like 45-ish degree angle pathway up, where they've put like some ladders down in there. Because again, you're not meant to enter. It was basically like climbing up a slide that had maybe one or two flat spots to get there.
Right.
And it's hot. I mean, even though it's winter there, which doesn't account to a whole lot, but it's still just, you're in a stone monument above ground in a desert. And it's not, there's no airflow.
Right.
It's just nasty. And once you get up into the tomb, it's just this giant room that has like black walls and some construction spotlights in there, and the sarcophagi where they took the casket out of.
Yeah.
So it's a carved stone box with no decoration. It's like, oh, I've sweated my balls off and bumped my head because I'm a big boy. Got up in here, and it's just a concrete toy box with nothing in it, no decorations anywhere in there.
Wow.
And then you got to try and get back down. I mean, it was still amazing. Like, I've been inside the center of the pyramid.
Right.
Yeah.
Falls out. I loved it, but.
But you're in your mind, you're expecting like you see the hieroglyphs and all the stuff. Yeah.
I've seen my family. We went to Tutankhamun. He was in Chicago Museum when we were kids.
Yeah.
And I've seen him in Memphis, Tennessee. Like I've seen like these glorious pieces of Egyptian history.
Yeah.
And now here I am in the center of it, and it's just a black room.
Yeah.
With a couple of electric lights.
Wow.
And I'm hot. And you get people in there. It was really funny because you got people in there with cameras that are trying to figure out like what they can take a picture of, and there's nothing.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably what was there has been stolen and put in museums. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's if you want to see the good parts of the inside of the pyramids, you got to go to the museums.
Right.
Yeah.
But so many people have been embalmed and entombed, like people on so many levels of the governments back then, and they've yanked them all out of their eternal homes. That when you go into that National Museum there on the north side of Tahrir Square, they've got on the second floor literally just stacks of the tombs, just all of their King Tut boxes,
right?
Just like 4 and 5 high, because they're just like, well, I mean, do you really want to check out the decoration on an accountant from Egypt 2,500 years ago?
Yeah.
So he's the fourth from the bottom. But yeah, it was nuts, like how many of these are. Because if you get to see King Tut, you're like, holy crap, like this thing is so gorgeous and so amazing, and it's so and he is unique because he was a pharaoh.
Yeah.
But for the most part, all the underlings, and they have like decent sarcophagi. I mean, there's a lot of beautiful work there, but it ain't nothing to the gold inlaid, gem freaked out stuff that the bigwigs had.
Right.
But without having known what that was, these others would have been insanely impressive, but instead they're just stacked up on the top floor of the museum with very little identification.
That's wild. That's wild. Man, Egypt is a freaking... It goes without saying, obviously, that it's a marvel, and it continues to really, there's so many. As much as we know, there's so much that we don't know. I mean, especially when it comes to the construction of the pyramids and just the amount of well, that's what I was going to say, but I mean, just how we could, if you believe that we constructed those, the human beings did, the amount of precision that is there is just unreal, and that they're still there and they're still positioned in that way is just insane.
And how many of them there are, because I mean, the ones we know about the pyramids of Giza, but off to the side of that, there's the earlier pyramids that make the pyramids we talk about look like children.
Right.
And they're trying to rebuild those and get them rehabilitated. And it's amazing to walk through those. They're a lot smaller, but holy crap.
Did you get
this is way older. Like, you guys, you're the new kids on the block. Of God.
I'm going to take the dog for a while.
Yeah, it's nuts just to think about the age of these things and that they're still there and that they've survived.
Yeah.
And we think we know some things. But
right. Did you see
they did not leave their manuals.
Did you get this to check out the Sphinx when you were there?
Oh, yeah, because they're all in that
neighborhood.
There.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it was just so glorious because until I got out of the pyramid, there was nobody there. I mean, I walked that desert area by myself with the guide for a while. I got to do all of this by myself. I got to listen to the wind crawl across the sand, and it was nuts. And I had clear views of everything.
That's awesome.
That is really
how far away is the Valley of the Kings from the pyramids?
That I don't know, because I did not make it down there.
Yeah, I think it's quite a ways, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
pretty good travel.
It's a bit. Yeah. Especially for back in the day.
The valley was not.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Yeah. Cool stuff, dude. Incredible.
Yeah.
Man.
And what a story.
Say, Barry.
Yeah.
What's the weirdest job you've ever had?
That's a good question. It would either have to be the time that I worked at a cattle feedlot or the time that I worked for a Greek painter.
Were you his model?
Not quite.
Well, it's funny because one of my weirdest jobs was being a model in art school, but it was portraits, not full body nude. The reason I'm asking is because those jobs may be kind of normal, but we know people are out there that have weirder jobs than that. Maybe you're a mortician. Maybe you're a scientist trying to bring back the dinosaurs or the woolly mammoth.
That'd be cool.
That would be really cool. If you guys out there have weird jobs, unusual jobs, crime scene photographer, maybe you worked at an adult educational film set, if you know what I mean. Wink, wink. Just something that's unusual, out of the ordinary, and, a little bit weird. Hey, those are cool stories too. We'd love to hear those. So give us a call or an email or whatever. You know how to get a hold of us. Be part of the community of Weirdsville.
Korea's first president, take 3. Korea's first female president, Park Geun-hye. She was all right, man. They got her in, and people were excited. We have our first female president, because they've had some crappy presidents. There was this guy named EMB who had been a corrupt mayor of Seoul, like noticeably corrupt. Nobody debated the fact that he was super corrupt. And then they elected him president, and surprise, he was a corrupt president. So they spent a lot of time protesting him. Oops. They elected this woman, and she seemed to be all right until the boat sank, the Sewol, and people freaked out about that. And just again, it felt like she was responsible for it, and she definitely wasn't. And things went south from there. So there was this massive protest to get her out of office, and it actually worked. She got kicked out. She was impeached, thrown out of office, and so I went up to one of the protests for that, one of the big pushes in the same area where I've done many protests in the past. Of course, I'm up there flashing the OPA press card, and I'm alone. I've got a backpack full of drinks and just trying to figure it out. It's cold. It's winterish. I've been hashing that afternoon, so I'm not entirely sober. And I get up in lines, and when you get up to our embassy where they've had these buses making like there's a horseshoe shape on the north end of the street. They didn't have the horseshoe. They had it leading us off to the west, like corralling us, with all these police buses parked, butt to butt, face to butt, whatever, no space in between to walk them. So it's just a corridor. And these people are protesting. They're angry at the police defending her, they're protecting her. So people are just putting stickers on there. Now that this is 2016, 17,
okay,
the age of social media, and everybody, you got to put your pictures out there. So like people are on dates with, the guy taking a picture of his girlfriend, slapping a sticker on there. Families are out with their children, like pushing their little 5-year-old up against the bus with a sticker, taking pictures of that cute little protest, and they literally they'll sticker the entire side of the bus where they can reach. You cannot see bus, just sticker. So you go through this, and there's people. Back in the day, they used to sell wax candles in little paper cups, and for like $1 a piece. Now they're selling LED light candles. People are still selling snacks and booze and party favors, and so we're going through all this. And I get up. They've moved it to where it's off to the side of all this area, and I get into this protest, and I was like, well, let's just see how far, because this is the first one in Korea where I actually had a proper press pass. I'd had an unmarked paper one before, but now I had like a plastic with my face on it. And so I just start walking to the front of the line. Just, hey, it's me. What's up? Oklahoma Press Association. And then, American Press. Apparently, we didn't think this one was that important, so they just kept pushing me to the front. And it turned into, it was just a spectacle. Like instead of like in 2002 when they were beating up the cops who were protecting our embassy, they understood that the police at this event, they didn't want to be there, and they respected that. At one point, like a girl, like a college-age girl, jumps up from the crowd with a rose and gives it to one of the officers. And the people sat down and got angry at the other people who didn't sit down. So like the what little what, if you want to call it violence, that was there was reflected back to their own people instead of the police. It got really weird, but they put me at the front because I had a press pass, so they thought I was somebody. And then at one point I just got to walk through it because there's a whole neighborhood behind the police that it's these historic old house. Well, I say historic, I mean since the war, but it's very protected housing because it's so close to where the president lives, and they weren't letting people back there. And so I just walked around. I got a beer or soju in my hand, press pass in the other, just walking around checking out all this stuff. And you'd see a couple people that lived there that proved that they lived there getting through the lines, and it wasn't all that interesting. So I go back through the police and back to the front, and it's begin, just people talking, not the most interesting thing in the world. So I've decided I've had enough. And at this point, I live far, far southeast of Seoul. I need to catch one of the last buses out, or else I'm going to be stuck there for the night. So I go back through the corridor of buses that I'd seen before. And at one point, somebody had gotten up and spoken out about the police and how we're not here because we're against the police. We're here because we're against the president, and we shouldn't assault the police. We shouldn't have done what we've done to the buses. And so, let's undo that. So as I walked out, on the way in, everybody's stickering the buses with protest stickers. On the way out, everybody's out there with credit cards, scraping it off. But it was the exact
That's
same
wild,
thing.
dude.
They had their kids. They're like, all right, little son me, here's a credit card. Scrape that shit, bitch. And so they were taking like pictures and videos of their children scraping off the stickers that they had just a few hours before told them to put on. And, the guys and the girls that are out there on a date night, that had been slathering these things with stickers are out there with their cards, scraping them off, and again, documenting it all. And the police hated them for taking off the stickers because they could have just gone on with a cannon later and sprayed them off. But with them taking the credit cards to them, they're scraping the paint off. So the worst damage done during this protest was when the people were supporting the police and screwed up all their buses.
That's hilarious. Hey, that's a nice t-shirt you got on there.
Oh, thanks, dude. It's brand new. Do you like that? It's one of the official What's Your Weird Story t-shirts.
Where'd you get that?
It's funny that you ask. I just got it off the brand new Spreadshirt.com site for the What's Your Weird Story podcast. There's no www. You just go straight to shop.spreadshirt.com/what's without the apostrophe WHATS hyphen YER-WEIRD-STORY, and that'll take you right there.
I mean, you can never own enough clothing.
Well, it's true, Barry. There's t-shirts for the ladies because, they're cut differently. There's hoodies, which are really cool. There's two different kinds of hoodies, and there's also tote bags, so you can tote your stuff.
That's so cool, man.
So if you guys go out to spreadshirt.com, What's Your Weird Story, currently there are 2 designs, but there will be more going up very soon. So just keep your eyes out for that. And if you decide to get one of our shirts, tag yourself on Instagram to ours or Facebook. Show your love. Show us what you got. Let's see your true colors.
Well, I think the thing that we've learned so far about Sam is he's no stranger to chaos. He embraces it. He walks into it. He leans into it, and that's part of what we love about him so much.
Yeah. He walks into it with a cup in hand.
I love it. It's so true. Yeah, man. And I think getting to experience something like that in a different country, it really does help give you perspective on things and the way things are done in your country. And like we talked about before, in these times we need as much perspective as we can get. And so it's nice to have some stories that are, from a different point of view. And I mean, his wife, the fact that he decided, well, hey, why don't we go check a riot out? You know what I mean? Let's go see what happens. And they consider that to be a fun time. That's a great way to spend some time together, bonding.
Yeah. It's a nice date night. I guess.
Yeah.
For Sam.
I know. I love the fact that they're selling concessions, during the protest. It's so great. It's what an American idea,
I know, right? Our far-reaching ideas of capitalism are, embraced by the rest of the world.
Yeah, it's funny.
So at least parts of it.
Yeah.
But, dude. And how different, it is that, just that the things that take place,
Yeah.
And just, how the different approaches to, the people that are protesting are directing their anger, because it is all anger and frustration. And that's what all protests are about. We're angry about this thing, and people aren't listening. So, this is what it is. So, we're going to get loud. Right. And mostly controlled. So,
and that's a very human reaction to something that you don't agree with, man. And we need to stand behind that idea across the world. But yeah, it is. It's interesting because it seems like what he was talking about there in Korea, it was like they had sort of the designated area where we can get loud. You know what I mean? And it was like, there's just such a different way of thinking about, an approach to things that, I think it's great. It's great, man. Yeah.
I agree, man. I think if we had more of an idea, because technically we do have the right to peaceably assemble and, in protest, but of course, all it takes is one person to say, oh, well, I don't think this is not a peaceable assembly or anything like that, So, if you allow people to demonstrate, and if they do it properly and you allow them to do it properly, we'll get more done.
Right.
And, whereas, unfortunately, things kick off. But, you do have agitators, people who are, agents of chaos, people who are work for, or anti-protesters who want to make stir the pot and make the protesters look bad. But, that's what's happening here.
Yeah.
But, the thing, the fucking USA, that just made me laugh.
Right.
Fucking USA. It's almost like a surf song.
Right.
Like,
right.
Or something.
Yeah. I remember the first time I heard French kissing in the USA. I had a friend who had a shortwave radio, and we tuned into like some European radio station. And even though that it sounds very naive and sort of at the time it sounded risque to me. It was like French kissing in the USA. Like, wow, that's provocative. I was like 10 years old or whatever. I'm hearing this and I'm like, what in the hell are they talking about? But I can't think of anyone more prepared for these kind of weird situations than Sam. And like when he was in Egypt and he just like decides to go down into the craziness that was going on there. That was a real volatile time.
That was, it was safer than the previous year, when the actual Arab Spring, when shit really went down.
Right.
But still, it was not
crazy. Yeah.
Safe. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Like he said, the foreigners were not going. Even the press were not going down in it.
Yeah.
And then he made that friend who showed him his groinal area.
Right.
And his second belly button from. Second
belly button located down in his nether regions.
Yes, but and how that guy, his brother, it's just sad stuff. But and then the kids, the kids who were like throwing rocks at him and then let him pass and then throw rocks.
Right.
Knowing Sam, and I hope that everybody listening to this has got a feeling now of knowing Sam a little bit, where everything is possible when Sam stumbles through, man. His life itself is
possibilities are only a thought away. He's a man of action, Sam. So, he's great, man. And we've tapped that resource while we have him, and we're so appreciative of him. Taking time to come hang out with us, and just the hours of stories and lunacy is just it's just fun. It's great. It's good stuff.
Yeah, there's so much. Anytime we talk to Sam, minimum we spend 3 hours on Skype talking to him.
Yep.
We have to cut so much of it out.
Many
random things. We got into a discussion on K-pop that we're gonna save that for Spin Jamorama or something.
Yeah, man. You want to hear some middle-aged white dudes talk about some K-pop?
All right. Well, hey, on that note, let's go ahead and wrap it up for the week, and we will see you guys next week. Next week, Barry. We have Bubs Harris. You remember
cool.
Bubs?
Yeah, man.
Talk to him. Bubs. It's rare that you get an email from somebody that says they want to come on your show because they had to kill a man. And
yeah,
so,
right.
But Bubs is also a comedian, a touring comedian. So there's more to that story.
Yeah.
Because it was his friend that he had to kill. But don't worry.
It ends in a good spot.
It ends in a good spot. It didn't without ruining it. I don't want to ruin anything, but don't worry too much until next week. But it's a great story.
It is. Everything's
fine. Bubs, this isn't some secret confession that we have to turn him over to the police. Nothing like that at all. It's a wild one, and it's fun. So
it is.
So yeah, join us next week for more of your weekly weirdness. And until then, be safe.
Be weird.
As always, if you have a weird story, we want to hear it.
If you have a lot of them, we want to hear them all.
We can't do this podcast without your invaluable contributions.
Whether it's sharing your stories,
listening,
rating,
and spreading the word about the podcast. Thanks for listening. Until next time, be safe.
Be weird.
The stories presented on the What's Your